The following is an Operation Podcast production.
We're tending to just do incremental work. We're tending to, kind of inch forward. And I find that we need tools to intercept our brains to sort of put them into this high energy mode. And I think that that low energy brain state is really, there's like an evolutionary sort of reason behind it.
For the person that's never heard the term neuroplasticity, what is that?
Our evolutionary inheritance. It's something that from the day that we're born until the day that we die, our brains are just constantly adapting and evolving to our environments. And it's really what's happening is our brains are literally rewiring as we're talking, like in the conversation right now. There's remodeling happening in our brains. It happens in response to conversation, thinking, emotions, actions, changes in our environment. And what I find really wonderful is that we can engage our neuroplasticity in a very proactive way.
When we're accustomed to a low energy brain state and lulled by the comfort zones it creates, it's difficult to rouse ourselves to act with intention and create the lives we truly want to lead. I feel like that's a pretty strong call to arms out of the gate for your work. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
The low energy brain state is something that I have this deep awareness of, and I sort of came up with this term, the low energy brain state, because it's like how I feel when I'm in it. It's like the autopilot mode. It's the energy saver mode. And I notice this a lot in the work that I do, where we're trying to invent new medical technologies. And I feel like we're tending to just do incremental work. We're tending to, kind of inch forward. And I find that we need tools to intercept our brains to sort of put them into this high energy mode. And I think that that low energy brain state is really, there's like an evolutionary sort of reason behind it. I think it's like, back 10, 15,000 years ago, when we were kind of scanning the savannah for potential threats. And, if there was something on the horizon, we might need to go into that high energy brain mode and just get out of there, run, or if we're hunting or if we need to move. But generally, we're in this low energy brain mode where we're conserving our energy. And I think that affects us in all areas of life. And it can really minimize our ability to innovate personally and professionally. And I just find myself kind of gravitating towards that state constantly. And so I've been working on developing tools to get my brain into this higher energy kind of lit state, where I can really do my best thinking and maximize creativity and curiosity, and really make sure that I'm maximizing connection with others and living to my potential.
So is this natural tendency to conserve energy, is this necessarily a bad thing, or is this something that is just limiting our potential?
Well, I think that it definitely has a purpose and a function in our lives. If we're learning a new skill, we don't want to have to sort of relearn it every time. So we want to kind of lock something in and then have that be the next baseline, kind of to jump forward from. But I think that what I've found is that there's just so many areas of my life where if I'm not sort of being proactive and engaging tools or strategies, I'm kind of in this low energy state where I'm just sort of accepting the status quo. And I find, for example, like let's say I'm online, I'm much more easily to be in that state where my brain's getting hijacked, I'm being pulled in all these directions. The algorithms are just kind of grabbing a hold of me and sucking me in. And so I need to have these strategies in order to prevent that from happening and to really be intentional.
Mm-hmm. Now, your background is primarily in regenerative medicine. What is that? And can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on your background? Because you have a wild one. You're a very, very well accomplished scientific guy. And so what is regenerative medicine? How did you get there?
So regenerative medicine is one of the things that we work on. And to me, it's really about, there's so many different therapies today that are kind of band-aid solutions. They're not what we would call disease modifying. They might sort of lessen the symptoms, but they're not necessarily slowing the progression of the disease or sort of inhibiting it in a particular way or restoring function. And so what regenerative medicine aims to do is actually try to reverse the course of a disease or an ailment to completely restore original function.
And I know a lot of your work, and especially in what we're going to get to talk about here, the LIT method, focuses around neuroplasticity. For the person that's never heard the term neuroplasticity, what is that?
Our evolutionary inheritance. It's something that from the day that we're born until the day that we die, our brains are just constantly adapting and evolving to our environments. And it's really what's happening is our brains are literally rewiring as we're talking. Like in the conversation right now, our brains are rewiring to a certain degree. We're having new connections that are forming between neurons. There's remodeling happening in our brain. Proactive way. So we have these incredible, prefrontal cortex, in our brain. The prefrontal cortex in humans is the largest when you compare it kind of relatively to brain size. And that endows us with these amazing abilities to make decisions and problem solve and think and really be intentional. And so with that, we can intentionally program our brains. And so it's kind of like any sort of skill that we have developed in our lives, we might be able to kind of look back and say, okay, when I started, it seemed very foreign. It seemed really difficult. It seemed very frustrating. I just wasn't getting it. But over time, it becomes easier. And that's engaging neuroplasticity. That's the rewiring that we have at our control at any moment. And so we can make something easier and easier by practicing it or by, engaging in skill development. And to me, it's just so incredible how, we all have this, but yet we're only really using a very small percentage of our human machinery right now.
And I understand that you actually do something to contribute to your brain health, your neuroplasticity, that caught me a little off guard, and that's this pressing pause aspect. You contribute a lot of your brain health growth and neuroplasticity to pressing pause. What does this look like, and how does seemingly not doing something actually enhance or contribute to neuroplasticity?
Nowadays, we fill our days with just so many back-to-back things, meetings, and just so much information coming at us from all angles and stimuli. And I think that we really need time to process information and experiences. We need time to slow down because that's when mind really turns into matter. So if we're practicing, for example, a new skill, Molly Gerbrian, who's a violinist and a neuroscientist, has done research in this space. And what she found is if you have an hour to practice a new skill, it's best to actually break it up. So maybe you do 10 or 15 minutes and then you take a 5 or 10 minute break.
Really?
Because it's in the breaks when your brain is actually remodeling. It's in the breaks or the pauses when your brain is undergoing physical changes. And that also happens when we sleep. We all have this incredible pause that we take, hopefully every night. But we need to have these intentional pauses when we're developing new skills so that we can embrace fully our brain's ability to remodel. And then there's also something that she found in her research, which is this startle effect. And so what it is that when, let's say we're learning a new skill, it could be a new language or a sport or, whatever it is, and we take a break and then we reapproach it, there's a certain part of it that we'll forget, and that kind of startles our brain. And that then allows us to even be more attentive, more focused. It kind of puts us into this hyper-focused state that then allows you to imprint into your working memory and then into your long-term memory more easily.
Kind of sounds like a kickstart. It's like we know the sequences of things we need to do to get the engine running, but sometimes we need to kickstart it a little bit more. And then it's like, okay, here we go. I got it.
I think that's exactly right. And we need to have those kind of kickstart moments, not just at the beginning, but throughout the entire process.
What is maybe one thing, if there is a one thing, you see a lot of people doing right now in the US that you believe is actually diminishing their neuroplasticity?
Well, one of the ways I think about neuroplasticity is, it's really ours to embrace. It's ours to really benefit from. And I think it's something where if we're conscious about it and we make a conscious effort, we start to think about all of the activities that we do on a daily basis and how they actually, rewire our brain. So for example, the media that we consume. So, if you go on Netflix and you watch, let's say like an action film, and I love action films, versus let's say like a documentary that might have certain emotions associated with it. It might sort of resonate with certain sort of things that you're passionate about. That what we consume, through the media that we watch is actually impacting our brain wiring. And so I think it's important for us to really start to consider that, like people say you are what you eat, but I also believe you are what you see, you are what you hear, because all of it is really affecting the remodeling of our brains.
Wow.
And so what I've tried to do is be more conscious about what I watch. And so I tend to watch more, let's say, like documentaries, or if it's a movie, I tend to watch movies that are based on true stories rather than what I used to watch, which was just, kind of action, kind of movies like that.
So am I hearing you correctly that maybe fiction content is not the best compared to nonfiction content for our brain health, for our enhancing our neuroplasticity?
Well, I think that, I feel like, there's certainly a place for us to be entertained and sometimes you just want to do something mindless and have your minds
tap out
and engage. And maybe, there's certain types of movies that you saw as a kid and it just brings you comfort. And, so I'm totally into all of that. I guess what I'm saying is really that we have this opportunity. It's ours, the decision in terms of, what media we consume, what we listen to, what we watch, how long we listen to that or how long we watch. And I think all of these things really impact our brain wiring. And then that impacts how we behave and how we sort of receive cues from our minds and our bodies. Our bodies are very intelligent. And the cues from others. And so I think that we can be more intentional with the environments that we're creating around us, and the environment not just being the city that we live in or what we have hanging on our walls, but sort of, what we're engaging in the digital world as well.
For argument's sake, if we wanted to, let's say the person listening wanted to make a goal for the next 30 days, I want to work on enhancing my neuroplasticity. I want to grow the capabilities of this guy up here. If I made it a part of that goal to watch a documentary a week, would that contribute to higher to that goal compared to watching a rom-com?
So the way I think about that is that I think everything we do has a domino effect. And so if we make a conscious effort, even to do something small, right? Like let's say that we're currently just, watching mindless things just because, our days are so busy and we just feel like we need to check out. But we make a conscious effort, let's say, to watch something that is going to connect with us emotionally. Or maybe there's something that we're really passionate about that we're not doing, and we make a conscious effort to connect with that.
I'm hearing intention. So it really comes down to if we're conscious and aware and having intention around what we're doing and consuming, that kind of still hits that sweet spot.
Yeah, doing things more deliberately. I think that once we make a small step in that direction, it starts to percolate through our entire lives. And so I think that, and that impacts our neuroplasticity, and we start to be able to sort of tune into it. And, before we were talking a little bit about press pause, something that I have found that is really useful is, so we have two dogs, Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. I'm the primary I take care of them pretty much, just all day long. And what I do is, I used to be someone who I would just walk really fast. I would just accelerate, really. Anytime I started walking, I'm accelerating. I'm way ahead of my wife,
That's the East Coaster in you, moving with a purpose. I know. I respect that. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I just started to try to be more intentional, more deliberate. And so I started to slow down. And then what I started to do was cycle through my senses when I'm walking outside.
Oh, wow.
So what I'll do is I'll say sight, and I'll look, let's say, at the texture of the bark on the trees. I'll look at the leaves. I'll look at the tops of the trees. To really, it's almost like a practice in resensitizing the aliveness of, kind of like, kind of getting back to what it really means to be human. I mean, we have these incredible senses to experience the world. And I think they kind of get dimmed and dulled by our current culture and just, where we're at today. And so I find by cycling through my senses as I walk outside, it just has this, like, it allows me to connect more with what is there. And then, if I say, like, okay, I'll go through sight, and then hearing, and I'll just listen. I'll hear maybe like the leaves moving, or the wind, or birds, or, it's the squirrels. And then, and then I'll do touch, and I'll feel like my heels hit the ground and my toes, and I'll kind of feel the clothes against my skin in various places, and the wind go against my face. And I just find it to me, and then it's sort of like just, and it's something that, we kind of say, we get to this point where we're like, oh, I can't fit anything in. I have no time. I have no time for this. But we all walk in, from place to place. And so this is something that's really easy to fit into our days. And what I found is that, like, the more that I do it, the more I'm connecting with what's there, the more I'm sort of feeling something, the more calm. And I think I'm really switching from this sympathetic to the parasympathetic.
Not just going through a motion of a common task. You're actually choosing to be engaged and present and aware of all the things that you actually are receiving at that time, instead of just point A to point B.
Yeah, and there's so many nuances out there that I think are just so beautiful for us to connect with. My friend Bridge, he said to me, we connected a few months ago, and he said to me, if somebody was to build a bird and put it in a box, right? And then they opened it and they showed you and they said, okay, look, I actually built this bird. Like, everyone would be like, oh my God, like, that's unbelievable that you built this bird. But yet here we have birds flying all around us, and we just look up and say, okay, that's a bird. And
if we even notice it.
Right. If we notice it. Yeah. And so, to me, it's like we have these just feats of, there's just so many opportunities to experience awe all around us. And by cycling through my senses as I walk, I sort of open up like a vista of possibilities to experience that awe more on a daily basis.
It's funny. I did something similar about a year ago. I began a regular meditation practice, and just in general, I was trying to introduce more stillness and slowing down in my life. And I realized an area where I wasn't doing that was taking out the dog. And I, like a lot of people, I'm sure, you go like, all right, come on, I got 10 minutes. I got to take the dog out, go do your business. And of course, what does the dog do? They want to circle around a spot a million times. They want to sniff a bunch of things. And I was getting frustrated. I'm like, come on. Just I want you to go. I want you to do the thing that I want you to do so I can go back in and get back to work and do all these things. And I had this moment where I was just like, Chase, just let her be a dog. She's circling around. She's sniffing. She is doing all the things that you just described. She is enjoying being outside. My man, I take her out 3 times a day. She's getting like maybe an hour total of like outdoor time. That sounds crappy. So I just like, let me let her be a dog and just slow down. And it also kind of showed me where I was, in a very small way, introducing, this is what I want. This is what I want to be accomplished, how I want it to be accomplished, the speed at which I want it to be accomplished. And so it's also another practice in me kind of just letting go of control a little bit. It seems so basic and fundamental, but it really resonated with me. And that little aspect of letting my dog be a dog for a few minutes a day, a couple times a day, man, I would walk back into the house just in a lot calmer state and ready to just dive back into work instead of just going from frustrated state indoors to frustrated state outdoors, back to frustrated state indoors.
Yeah. And I feel like that taps into neuroplasticity because the more that you do that, right, you're actually training and rewiring your brain to then make it easier for you to be open to and have awareness of these other experiences where you can slow down and the benefits of doing it. And then you'll seek it out, you know, in other circumstances. And it's really important, I think, for everybody today to really have an active strategy to switch from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, where you know, just because, you know, there's studies that have shown that, you know, when we receive an email or when we go on, let's say like YouTube, or we look at the headlines, we literally hold our breath. It's called screen apnea. Linda Stone, who I had the great pleasure of interviewing for the book. It's a term that she coined, and she, you know, did studies and found that people hold their breath when they see, you know, shocking headlines. That's the thing, is that if we don't, you know, kind of try to be more deliberate, then we're just going to be in this heightened state of you know, this fight or flight response throughout our days. And that's going to create inflammation, and it's going to create anxiety, and, you know, contributes to depression and the loneliness epidemic. It's all sort of interconnected.
Yeah.
Talking about dogs, one thing that I've been doing recently is when I walk the dogs at night in particular, is I will actually walk backwards so I can see them walk towards me.
Interesting. Why?
And well, I've been looking for ways. So you know, I'm someone who used to watch Netflix when I walked my dogs. Like I was so.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I mean, I've checked an email or two, but I've never full on watched a Netflix show watching the dog. Wow.
Yeah. I used to be so high strung, so goal focused. I can give you so many examples in my life where just like doing extreme things like that. And I've just been trying to become more deliberate. And so for me, it's like, okay, put the phone away. And my goal, you know, with technology in particular, I found, you know, if I say to myself, okay, just don't pick up your phone or put your phone away, it just doesn't work for me at all. But if I set the intention, let's say on a walk, that I want to connect more with the dogs, like that's the intention.
Okay.
I can't do that if I'm on my phone. And
right. It's not, I want to put my phone down. That's different than I want to spend more time and focus on the dogs.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a subtle change. And what I realize is that when I make the intention, I want to connect with the dogs, all of a sudden I notice cues I didn't notice before. Like, for example, I noticed that one of our dogs, Ginger, she looks back at me like every 10 or 15 seconds. Like she wants to make the eye contact. And when she sees me, you know, there's a little burst of energy, right? Like when she sees me. And then the other dog, Ryder, he'll look back at me every minute or two. And if we make eye contact, he's a burst of energy, you know? And so I can like detect these things now. And I just get a lot of joy out of that. You know, I love that. And so, you know, and I also realize like if I take them into the woods, their energy level is like a 2-3x, like maybe even more compared to just walking on the pavement or walking on the sidewalk. And so now I make a conscious effort to take them in the woods where it's just, you know, it's like their natural habitat. It's where they're supposed to be. There's even been scientific studies that have demonstrated that if you just put a nature scene on your screen and watch it, you do get some effect of switching from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah.
I mean, to Apple's credit, recently got a new laptop, and the desktop picture also then turns into kind of an animated screensaver, and it's this beautiful like drone shot of just this green rolling hills, kind of, I think it's like a vineyard or a small garden, and it's beautiful. And I'll literally the other day, I caught myself, I popped up to my wife and I was like, I just want to sit and watch this for a few moments. And it's just, in a way, it's like distracting because it deterred me from my work. But I mean, can you call a moment of Zen really a distraction? It probably was because I needed it, right?
Yeah, I think that we're just in this day and age where our culture, our society, it just atomizes our attention. It like cubes our time. It flattens our imagination, and we need tools and strategies and sort of like a holistic approach, I think, to life to really to regain and reconnect with what we have. I mean, we have this incredible, all of these incredible capabilities, and I'm just starting to sort of crack the surface. I think, personally, on, I mean, how amazing is it that you just, you go into nature and you just have this enhanced feeling of wellness. And here we are taking all these pills and, trying to figure out, and all we need to do is just sort of step into nature. And if it doesn't get you the first time, you can start experimenting with other things like cycling through your senses or, you can, one of the things I've been doing recently is I go up to a tree and I just kind of put my hand on it and I close my eyes. Just for 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And I just,
You don't see a lot of that in Boston.
Yeah, you don't see a lot.
Plenty here in LA, but not a lot of that in Boston. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've never seen anyone else do it, but in Boston. I've just been trying to do it just as an experiment to see what happens and just to see what comes into my mind and see my comfort level, and part of me is like, I feel a little uncomfortable sometimes doing it, but like I get over that, if I start doing it over and over, I feel like, again, it's like that neuroplasticity, you get more comfortable and that you're totally engaging that.
Speaking of tools and methods, I understand that you have one. So can you help us understand what is your approach to neuroplasticity and even this, lifestyle, the LIT method?
So LIT is really all about taking yourself off autopilot to live your full potential. And it's a simple set of 12 holistic tools that you can use to tap into a heightened state of awareness. You can bring that to any situation at home or at work, and also tap into this wellspring of energy that we all have within us. And it's like this sense that I'll just give you a couple examples. Let's say, for working out, right? Going and exercising, I feel like, one of the main goals is to feel good, to look good. But I've started to realize that one of the reasons why working out is really good for me, or exercising, biking or walking a lot, is that it just floods my brain with positive neurotransmitters. And it just makes me feel good and helps me to figure out which patterns no longer serve me. And it gives me energy to disrupt those patterns. And so that's how I kind of think about it, is like, we're all engaged in these patterns. Some serve us, some don't serve us. And if we're going to try to update these patterns and really live more deliberately and more intentionally, we need these tools. So we need to flood our brains with positive neurotransmitters. We need to be able to get over the fear and hesitation of embracing new experiences, because that can bring in fresh energy. Anytime we do, our brains love novelty, and anytime we do something new, it just, again, like activates those neurotransmitters. And we need ways to press pause so that we can process information and experiences and sync up. And we need ways to be humble and to be able to realize that we're contributing to and depending on this interconnected web of life. And we need tools to activate our brains and be able to ask questions and see it as a skill. And we need tools to be able to focus beyond failure. And when we encounter challenges, really see them as the greatest opportunities and insights for growth. And we need tools to tap into the cues that are constantly coming from our minds and our bodies and from other people, and the cues that move us to act, which is really, where we find our deep motivation. And so LIT is this series of holistic tools that for me has helped me to overcome like nearly insurmountable challenges throughout my life.
How can this approach really help someone that is so afraid to take action, is so afraid of doing something novel, and is so comfortable in their monotony. Because I feel like I hear that a lot. Like, oh, I would love to do this, but I don't, I'm worried about boom, boom, boom. Or I would love to go visit this place or live there, but I can't leave my hometown, or I don't want to change this job. Why do we have this aspect, this wanting of novelty, but yet we are so hard on ourselves and so difficult to take action sometimes?
Well, I think that what happens is that we practice not achieving our goals because we set our goals to be so grandiose. And so, it's like we haven't been to the gym in 3 years and then we say, okay, we're going to go today. And then we don't go, and then we shame ourselves. And so we end up practicing and developing this, kind of rewiring our brains so that we're not going to achieve our goals. Like it's that's kind of the programming that we're moving towards. And so I think that what we need to do is find a way to practice achieving our goals. And one of the ways that I like to think about this is what I refer to as activation energy. So this is something that kind of struck me early on in life when I was in chemistry class. So activation energy is really the amount of energy you need to put into something for something to occur.
To get a chemical reaction.
Reaction. So you put two molecules in water, let's say they don't react. You add some heat, not much is happening. They're kind of moving around more. You add a little more heat, and now they collide, and a new compound forms. They bind together. So I like to think of everything in life that I want to do as having a particular activation energy. And if the activation energy is really high, then I like to think of what are the steps that I can take to lower the activation energy so that it makes it easy for me to do it.
This is brilliant. I love this. This is so good. So how did you go about that, and what did you find? Was it kind of, it's less than I thought? Or do you find that once you kind of get that dialed in, you later on need more because it's become familiar?
Yeah, like I'll give an example. So this past summer, a friend of mine, Michael Gale, calls me on his bike, maybe not the most safest place to be making a phone call, but he's like, Jeff, being on my bike, it's my happy place, right? That's what he said. And I was like, oh my God, like me too. And then after I was thinking like, wait a moment, I haven't biked, in like a year, like what's going on? And I was like, okay, I really want to bike. So what I did was I sort of thought, okay, the activation energy is a bit high because I haven't biked in a while, and my bike wasn't ready to just jump on and go. So to lower the activation energy, first step I took was, I put air in the tires. And then, the next day what I did is, I cleaned it up, hung my helmet on the bike. And then the next day, I moved it to a place where I would see it every single day.
Wow.
And so the only thing really holding me back was this tiny sort of amount of energy I need to put into it, which was
to get on it.
To get on the bike, like 15. I just need to have 15 minutes to ride around the neighborhood. And this past summer, I rode over 1,000 miles. And so, I feel like we can just, if we think of things in terms of there's so many different ways you can look at things. And sometimes you find something that just connects with you, this sort of fresh perspective or new way of looking at something, and it unlocks opportunities. And for me, just thinking of things in terms of activation energy does that a lot.
So there are 12 steps in the LIT method. Can you maybe break down 2 or 3 that you think are the most important, or if you had to get rid of all the other ones, what are the 2 or maybe 3 that you think are the most important and have the most universal potential and application for anybody?
So one of the tools that really came into play during COVID is flip the switch. And flip the switch it's about noticing your inner desire for possibility. And then considering what's working, what's holding you back, considering other ways of thinking, and then taking a deliberate step forward. So what happened was when COVID hit, literally, my life came crashing down in my living room. Things had been going so well at the lab, but it struck me that I was addicted to work. I was so goal focused. I was so high strung. I was the person who would be networking at my kids' birthday parties. So my kids would be having their birthday party, and I'd be like just talking to parents to try to figure out are there collaborations that I could have. I'd be the guy who at soccer practice would be walking around the field to get my steps in constantly, like just like over and over and over, instead of like sitting there with my family and watching the game. I'd be the guy on vacation who'd be, sitting in the beach chair, just doing emails and my family's right there. Or, I was at the bar, or, like I became so disconnected, and it was like, my son, all of a sudden, I looked up and he was a teenager, the quarterback of the high school, and he wasn't coming to me anymore for conversation or for advice. I was just so, sort of trapped in this world. And so when COVID hit, it was this unintentional pause that I think, we all experienced. And for me, all of these things came to light, and I noticed this deep inner desire for possibility, that what was most important to me, most meaningful to me, I was not, I was not, I didn't have my attention there. I wasn't focusing my efforts on that. And so I started taking stock of what's working, what's holding me back, everything, since, I struggled a lot when I was younger. With undiagnosed ADHD and learning differences. I didn't know it. My parents didn't know it. My teacher certainly didn't know it. And when I got identified in the 7th grade and my grades went from C's and D's to A's, I still struggled all the time. Wow. And I needed to focus on efficiency and productivity because it just took me forever to do things. I was just, it was almost like, I don't know if you remember in the Terminator movie where at one point he has like this screen pops up and there's 4 things he could say, and he's trying to figure out which one to say. Right? Remember that?
Been there, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like my whole life has been like that, like I'm not quite sure what I see all these possibilities, I'm not sure, and it takes me extra time to figure things out. And so I spent my whole life focusing on efficiency and productivity. And I was able to really, develop tools to ramp that up to, a massive level. But then I became disconnected from the things that really were most meaningful and mattered to me the most.
These and so unfortunate kind of trade-offs. You try to problem solve for one thing, but yet it kind of creates another one in another area.
Yeah. So my pendulum had completely swung out, to one side, and I needed to bring it back. And so I started to consider other possibilities and other ways of thinking. And it was right there in front of me. My wife was experimenting. She was interested in very spiritual questions, and she had engaged some, spiritual teachers. And I said, hey, could you introduce me to them? And she did. And I started meeting with them. I started experimenting with various forms of meditation. And I found transcendental meditation extremely helpful. So I started practicing it. I started to develop awareness, like, this observer role of what all these thoughts going through my mind and all these stimuli that are kind of like that I normally would just act on and go with. And I was able to sort of develop a space in between stimulus and response. And I just all of a sudden I recognized it in that moment. The next thing for me was to take an active step forward, to really be deliberate. And that's where I started to engage, all of these, engage in the spiritual world, engage in developing awareness, and then I was able to start working on my relationships. And, my wife and I, had become almost like 2 ships, like passing in the night, and by having this awareness, I was able to then reprioritize my life and really bring that pendulum back.
Amazing.
And all the relationships improved.
I'm happy for you. Glad to hear that. That's amazing. Anything and everything is possible. All it takes is just, I think, that first moment of awareness. And then I think that's where so many people get bogged down is we immediately jump to, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. It's going to be too much work. We go there before having that moment of pause and awareness to just kind of take inventory. And I feel like after that, like the next step becomes so abundantly clear, and it's way less difficult than we ever imagined.
Yeah. I think one way also to think of it is almost like, what's the minimal neuroplastic unit that we can engage for something to happen. Like, it's like if we envision, just as an example, let's say you're going to get up on stage and give a presentation and you're just so fearful and you're like, there's no way I can do it. But could you get up on stage and say your name? You know, your first name, right? Could you get up on stage and say your first and last name? Could you get up on stage and say your first and last name, where you're from, right? So
it's like
sort
minimum effective dose, basically.
Exactly, for everything, right? And I think we can all think about that one little step that we'd be comfortable taking. And I think that, you know, once we sort of see ourselves doing that, then it just creates the domino effect. It just, the ball starts rolling down the hill.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Do you want to go on stage right now and tell your entire life story? Absolutely not. Could you go on stage and give me your first and last name? Yeah, I can do that. Okay, come back tomorrow. First, last name. What did you have for lunch? And just build upon that. Next thing you know, you're a speaker. You're up on stage telling your life story or whatever story you want, because you've given yourself those small wins, to your point, laid down these neural connections and enhance your neuroplasticity of what you quite literally can do, especially when you say you're going to do something. I think there's this other component beyond the neuroplasticity of showing our bodies and our brains what is possible to develop the skill sets necessary. But it's these little promises to ourselves, I think, that are crucial to building motivation, building confidence, and just almost that spiritual, emotional aspect as well. It's like spiritual neuroplasticity a little bit. Humans are a force of nature. Act like one. I love that. What do you mean by that?
If we look at, let's say, the evolutionary process, right? We have change that's constantly occurring on planet Earth, you know, throughout the entire universe, really. And in life, there's these adaptations that are constantly happening. And, you know, brains are being rewired. We have, you know, genetics, mutations are happening for survival. You know, there's this energy, this force of life, this life force, and it exists within all of us. And it's ours to embrace. It's ours to engage. And I think, you know, part of this is really sort of recognizing the nature within all of us and sort of connecting that to all of nature, to really seeing ourselves within this interconnected ecosystem and seeing that the power of evolution exists within us. It's something that we can actually be deliberate about. It's one of these things that, for me, there's been, you know, certain awakenings I needed to have to see this and to really embrace it. One of the times actually where this really struck me was if we go back to the second grade. You know, I was struggling with undiagnosed ADHD and learning differences. And we get to the end of the year and the teacher wanted to hold me back, which I think would have been, you know, quite devastating. And my parents negotiated for me to spend the summer doing sort of catch up. And so my friends went on vacation. I am now doing, you know, going in and with tutors every day. And I'll never forget, one day I go in and the tutor read a passage to me and asked me some questions, and I gave answers. And then she looked at me and said, "How did you think about that?" And that moment, like, I will never forget. It was like a light bulb moment. You know, in some way I almost felt violated because I was like, wait a moment, like it was this like I was shocked. I didn't know how to respond to that because no one had ever asked me that question before. And I sort of came away from that experience with this idea that there's this canvas in my mind that I could intentionally populate. Like it all of a sudden sort of flipped the switch on awareness that I could bring to everything. And I started being able to, you know, to deal with these struggles that I was sort of encountering, where, you know, I would sit at the back of the class and just be frustrated and angry. My mom tried flashcards and phonics. Nothing worked. I wasn't getting anything. Like nothing was working. And so I needed to develop tools to survive. And being asked that question, how did you think about that? it was like the first time that I was accessing metacognition, the first time as I kind of look back, you know,
It's
the
like
first
someone
time.
finally met you where you were instead of trying to drag you across where they wanted you to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Like helping me to sort of tune into that we do have this agency. We have this ability to think and to kind of create these mental constructs and to be aware and to observe patterns. You know, pattern recognition has been huge in my life. And that moment just opened up so many sort of possibilities for me to learn more about myself. And I think everything really comes from that.
You talk about how this approach is, quote, the ultimate renewable energy and is accessible to everyone, anytime, anywhere. How can people start applying this approach to their life today? Like, what does it actually tactically look like?
I think one thing we can do is notice our inner desire for possibility in something, right? So that could be at work, at home, personal evolution. It could be, you know, a skill that we want to learn. I mean, there's so many possibilities, but sort of noticing that we have this desire for something a little different, for something a little more, for something new, and starting to just bring our awareness to that. And again, I think anytime we do that, we start to create like a shift. We start to, you know, repattern our brains. We start to see what we're shifting our minds to all over the place. We start to notice people talking about it in conversation. You know, it's like that building that you walk by every day, that funny looking building, and then one day you see it and you're like, wait, why haven't I noticed this?
Yeah.
And so I think when we bring our awareness to something, it just it kind of like it creates this circuitry in our brains that then can connect with the outside circuitry, so that we can now start to recognize patterns and build on it. And I think that, to me, that's like just the first step that we can do.
So it's really awareness.
It's awareness. It's awareness, but it's also partnered with action. So we need to find some small way of taking a step forward. And that can be, I mean, there can be many different things. Like if you're someone who is just feeling really lethargic and, you know, things are just, it's so busy and there's no time for anything, we can start the domino effect by just making a small change. Like, for example, if we just change the hand that we brush our teeth with, you know, it's like one of those things where if we just, let's say, switch the toothbrush to the other hand, you know, we'll feel some sort of irritation with doing that, you know, won't feel right. It'll take twice as long, maybe longer. Maybe we don't feel like we're doing as good a job. But if we start to stick with it, we start to embrace our neuroplasticity, because it starts to get easier. And then we're like, oh, it's getting easier. You're actually rewiring your brain. Okay, if I can do that, then maybe I can do something else. And so just getting in the habit of making these small changes.
Wow.
Or like even walking outside, like we can just intentionally just slow down, and even just for a couple minutes, you know, just slow down your walk and just see how does that feel. Or maybe even just like walk in slow motion, you know, like if you're brave enough to do that,
Slow it down.
right?
Yeah.
Or walk backwards.
Yeah. How does what you do, and how does this lit method, and how does everything we just talk about, how does this help us live a life ever forward? Those two words, Chef, what do they mean to you?
So if we think about the lit method in the context of ever forward, I think that the essence really here is thinking of our lives in a holistic sense, thinking of every action, every thought that we have impacts everything else, that everything is all connected, not just within us, but around us, from the cues that we're giving off to other people, to the tone of voice that we use with people, to to the deep connection that we feel when we're truly leading with curiosity and we're engaging people and we're listening, we're truly listening to what they have to say. And to me, this is the path that we're all on. This is the path that enables us to thrive and really experience all of the best that life has to offer. It's again kind of coming back to the neuroplasticity that, you know, we can rewire our brains so that when we meet with people, we sense that connection, we feel it, and we can just constantly be deepening that.
Yeah.
We can be deepening everything. We can be deepening the meaning that we experience in everything in life. And I think that that's what ever forward just, you know, really, really means to me.
What I heard there is that really our potential is at a set point only if we let it be. Our ability to connect with the world, our world and the world and other people. Many people believe probably that this is my threshold, this is my capacity, this is just where I can go and what I can do. But through your work and through this concept of neuroplasticity, we can quite literally rewire our brain, show us new methods, show us new ways of living in ways that we never thought possible because of the own limitations that we place on ourselves or society has placed on us or we believe to be placed on us. But that set point is only if we let it stay there.